Welcome to Voices in the Wilderness, conversations about church and leader health. We thank you for listening, and we always encourage you to keep the conversation going. Voices in the Wilderness is brought to you by Preparing for Amazement Ministries, where we empower and equip churches and leaders to create lasting and transformational health. You can visit amazed15.org to learn more. My name is Marcus Carlson. I'm the Executive Director of Preparing for Amazement Ministries. And my co host is Peter Belschwinder, who is also on our ministry team. Today, our guest is Jen Binford, one of our ministry coaches, and our topic is the importance of organizational health, specifically as it relates to churches and ministries. And so we're excited to have this conversation and share a little bit with you today. So when we talk about organizational health, one of the individuals who's influenced our understanding of organizational health is a leadership author and consultant by the name of Patrick Lencioni. And he's written many books. Perhaps most well known is The Five Dysfunctions of Team or Working Genius. But one of his other books, called The Advantage, has really shaped our understanding of church and ministry leadership and organizations. And in the book, The Advantage, what he says is that organizational health is the one advantage for any organization. That health trumps everything. It trumps resource, it trumps market share, it trumps staffing. And so really, again, his premise is that organizational health trumps all. And for us as a ministry, we kind of have a corollary to that is outside of the work of God through the gospel. Health trumps everything in churches and in its leaders. And so when you all think about organizational health and this idea that health trumps, specifically as you think about churches and ministries, I'd be curious on hearing from both of you your thoughts on that, what you've seen and experienced. So Jen, what are some of your thoughts on this issue and topic?
As you know, I always have lots of thoughts. Yeah. So my first thought is when we are not a healthy church family or culture, what comes to mind is really a culture that it's very distracting from being on mission together, and we're not able to actually live out our calling on mission. And again, it's just a distraction, especially when there's a lot of infighting or when the culture is not healthy or becomes on the trajectory of more toxic, then it's just a distraction the enemy uses to get us off course from one, being on mission, but also from living out who our true identity is. That's the body of Christ.
I think you said something really important there, and that's that word culture, right? That health is a culture. It's not a program. It's not a checklist. That ultimately, when it comes to any organization, but certainly churches and ministries, health is a culture. So, Peter, what have been some of your experiences with cultural health in churches and in ministries?
Yeah, I would say with health and defining the culture has been key with mission and vision. So when a culture is, founded on a healthy mission and vision, and people get buy-in, and it's really from God, you're going to see the fruit of that ministry grow, and you're going to see that culture become healthy. If you don't have mission and vision, and it's not followed, you're going to have a toxic culture in your church or in your ministry.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, we've seen that lots, and maybe we've been a part of that, and maybe we've even contributed to that unknowingly or even knowingly. So, as we think about the importance of health, organizational health, what have you seen as some of the benefits and some of the consequences in healthy and unhealthy organizations, specifically churches and ministries?
Well, something I often hear you say, honestly, is you don't know what you don't know. And one of the things that I've seen that has been most destructive in cultures is our ill equipping to move through conflict and deal with conflict, because conflict shouldn't be avoided, and it's almost like, oh my goodness, what do we do now, that and this like surprise that conflict exists. It just is. conflict will come. And because culturally, at large, even outside the church, we don't have an agreed upon process or guidelines of how to move through conflict, we bring our ill equipping into the church. And because we're somehow holy, we are able to deal with it, which is just a myth. And without equipping, we tend to avoid conflict, and conflict avoidance actually causes toxic culture. And again, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't realize as a people that we have been conditioned for division. And we need to pay more attention to that.
So for me, when it comes to toxic culture and what I've seen is I've seen a lot of the let's just brush this under the carpet until that person goes away. That's causing the conflict. And then when that person goes, that stuff stays under the carpet and that conflict is by leadership. They feel, oh, well, that person's gone. So that mess, it stays there and nobody's ever going to know about it rather than just addressing it and bringing it to light and practicing healthy conflict resolution. So many times people leave the church or any ministry because of hurt feelings or whatever the conflict may be. And the church is so quick to just brush it under the carpet until that hurt party leaves and they take their baggage with them and the church never deals with it. And it's just a cyclical motion of continuing conflict and not addressing it properly. And it leads to further unhealth.
Yeah, and you guys both have referenced conflict, and obviously that's a huge piece of this, right? That a huge part of organizational health and healthy culture is certainly healthy conflict. And I want to pick up on something Jen said too about a division, right? That I think we sometimes have a false idea of what unity is, that we think unity is getting along. And so a lot of times we speed through process or ignore process or brush conflict aside or do it passive aggressively because we think that's what's nice, and unity is about keeping the peace, but really unity at the end of the day, unity is about love, moving forward in love. And it really is, when I think about unity, recognizing that disagreement and challenges can happen in unity, right? That we are unified in love, and that means that we can agree to disagree. It means that we can have conflict. It means that we can have people that agitate us and irritate us, for sure. And even as we think about health in general, right? That when I'm tired or when I'm not feeling well, I don't perform my best, right? I don't have the right focus. I don't do the best work. My attitude towards people and situations is challenging. And so for me, that's been a huge parallel, right? That when we're not well, we don't do well, we don't operate well. What do the two of you think about that corollary and that idea?
Well, what comes to mind is the realistic expectations of what it means to be the people of God. I think of the word ecclesia and how we are the coming together of God's people when we talk about church and about culture. And the word vibrancy comes to mind, the realistic expectation that we are vibrant. We're meant to be diverse. We're meant to have vibrant expressions of who we are. Like your nickname's Dr. Orange, and Peter's nickname is Orange Monster. And I have my own vibrancy, and my favorite color is something different. And just that emotions ought to be expected in this vibrancy of convictions and vibrancy of big emotions. And we don't have the expectation of that's really a part of who we are as our identity, and instead have, like you said, the peacekeeping and this niceness culture. And if everybody's just really calm and sweet, listen, people, I made a fire and I'm not always going to be calm and sweet, and I have big emotions. And that just realistic expectations of being human and being human together would be a healthier, like even just starting from realistic expectations of perspective of what a culture is and who we are as the people of God would help us to be able to function in a healthier way.
Yeah, and I think to that point too, the interesting thing I would note on that is like the heat of the moment, right? There's so many times I found myself in the heat of the moment and I've said things and you walk away and you say, why? Oh, that was not the way I should have said that. And that's okay. But the reality is in the church and in ministry, we have like four generations of people attending meetings and involved in church leadership and church politics. And it's really contentious sometimes because there's generations that don't know how to communicate with each other. So sometimes I take a step back and I say, wow, I didn't communicate with that person because they're, 30, 40 years older than me. And that's not how they like to be communicated with. And if you don't have that understanding and people don't have that grace with one another, it's going to cause that unrest and it's going to cause that, less vibrant culture that we want to see.
Yeah, you mentioned like four generations. That doesn't even count the ones that we've missed completely in the church, right?
Right.
And then the other thing I think about churches is that, there's a lot of, our faith carries with it a lot of emotion, which is a good thing, right? And so we get passionate, we get emotional, we get very connected. A lot of times in a world that's like changing so fast, church is that one kind of stable thing. But if it's unhealthy, it's creating unhealth in its people, right? Like Peter's got some illness spreading through his house, which makes me thankful that we're on the internet and not in person, right? Because when you're in unhealthy situations, right, that kind of creates continued unhealth. And when we talk about churches or ministries, certainly we don't want people coming in to a church and because of the unhealth of the church getting unhealthier in their faith or in their life themselves. That's a huge problem, and nobody wants to be a part of something that's unhealthy. And oftentimes, like, we may be a part of unhealthy family systems in their family. So, we're kind of stuck, right? Besides setting some boundaries here and there. And we might even work in an unhealthy job situation. And until we, find something else, the mortgage company keeps wanting to be paid. And so we put up with it. But church is kind of a voluntary thing, at least the idea of which one you choose. And so I think a lot of times when we have unhealthy churches, people just don't want to be a part of something that's unhealthy. Have you guys had any experience with that personally? Or what have you seen in terms of that idea of people not wanting to be a part of something? I know the answer to this question, but I think it's important.
Oh my goodness, I laugh only because looking back, like now I can see the growth that has come from the pain of coming from very unhealthy, toxic church culture. But it was brutal, and nobody wants to be a part of something that's not um, healthy. And honestly, what comes to mind as I think about this is that the church, the vibrant church, we are called to be life giving. To when we come together, the purpose is life giving, not and flourishing. And when we're unhealthy, that is not the outcome. Um, and I love that Peter brought up the different generations, whether it's a generational vibrancy or racial vibrant, like whatever the vibrancy is, recognition that we have different lenses of how we view the world and our life experiences, and being willing to, again, have realistic expectations and understanding that we come from different life experiences, different conditioning. We're able to show value to different ways of being in the world. And back to the concept of unity, when we're able to do that, if we are able to understand that we come from different, like you said, different family systems, uh, and come together and able to show value, we're able to actually move together instead of this idiosyncratic, I guess is the word that comes to mind, of like, my way of being is the only way. And that's just a mark of immaturity, honestly, in the church and Rex culture.
And moving together does not mean agreement, right? It does. Unity doesn't mean agreement. Peter, what
Yeah.
about you as you think about this and not wanting to be a part of unhealthy cultures, unhealthy churches? What are some of your experiences and reflections?
I mean, for me, I think when it comes to unhealthy environments, there's a self-realization that needs to happen that you're not in a healthy environment. For me, I was in one and I was doing this ministry, and we saw crazy, miracles, and the Lord was moving despite the unhealth. But ultimately, I would walk into this facility and I would just feel those unhealthy emotions. And it finally caused me to take a step back and say, you know what? I get that the Lord's moving here and he's doing something, but this isn't healthy anymore for me and I need to step away. And sometimes it's really hard and you just got to trust the Holy Spirit's leading when he's calling you to step away. Um, but I would say it's more common than not in today's culture and in today's church that we just have these broken cultures and people don't want to get involved because they just see it before they even walk in because we don't, some churches don't try to hide it. Some of them are just airing it out there and that's just the nature of it now.
Yeah. Or ignore it and
Yeah.
pretend it's not there, and avoidant behavior, as if we just don't look at it and shine the light on it at all. And instead it exacerbates the issue.
Well, and listen, I don't always like it when people point out the unhealthy things in me, whether it's a friend or the medical doctor or my spouse, right? I mean, it's not easy. And I think, something you said, Peter, that I'd love to pick up on in a different episode is, it wasn't healthy for me. So sometimes a culture may not necessarily be super unhealthy, but it's unhealthy for certain individuals, right? And I think that that's true as well. But what we're recognizing, what we're seeing is this is the X factor in churches, right? That health is the X factor. That outside of God's work, health is the biggest determinant of success, of longevity, even in the ability to make disciples who make disciples, right? That health is kind of the X factor, and anyone can do health, but our natural default is not to be healthy, not as people, not as organizations, and we see that every January 1st with New Year's resolutions, or me and my attempt during the Lent season to give up sweets. And there's somebody in a church I'm helping who makes really good chocolate chip cookies, and so that is a tension in my life, right? So health is not natural, right? It's not our natural thing, just like our natural thing is not righteousness, right? Our natural tendency is sin, not righteousness. But through Christ, we're capable of righteousness, and I think that's the important thing. Any church can do health, but we chase all these programs and we chase all these ideas and we try to have the nicest buildings or the most charismatic pastors or the greatest toys, and those things are fine and good as long as they're not the end of themselves. But at the end of the day, health trumps all of those things. And I think that, obviously any church can do health. And so why do you, like, in one.
Oh, bummer.
Maybe. Okay.
All right.
So for you all, when you think about the importance of health for a church, uh, in a sentence or two, why, if somebody said to you, why does health matter to the church? What would you say?
Health matters because without it, we are unable to live out of our identity of who we are as God's people and to be on mission together as we were designed to be.
And I would say with health is important because without it, we can't seek and save the lost. We can't do what we're called to do as a church. And if we're not doing that, then what's the point?
Yeah, and I think of what one of my early ministry professors said in undergrad, what you win them with is what you win them to. And so if we are winning people and discipling people in unhealthy churches, we are winning them and discipling to an unhealthy expression of discipleship, an unhealthy expression of following Jesus. Never mind the fact that, health is the biggest predictor of our effectiveness and longevity at a time where the church has struggled. And so, yeah, we just recognize, we've seen over and over again that outside the work of God through the gospel, health trumps everything in churches. And any church can be healthier, any person can be healthier, right? And any church can do health. You don't have to have the right staff, a certain amount of money, the right resources. Any church can do health, and we've just seen over and over again that importance. And so appreciate the two of you kind of sharing today about why why organizational health is important. And for those that are listening, we thank you for listening. We encourage you to keep the conversation going. We're going to continue to have lots of conversations about church health and leader health and the different nuances and issues and habits that lead to health or lead to unhealth. And so we encourage you to continue to join us on this journey and in Voices in the Wilderness, reflections on conversations on church and leader health. So thanks for both of you again for being here. And the first episode is in the books.